Today, we're diving into the raw and often unspoken realities of spousal caregiving. Imagine you're still partners, yet suddenly, your roles shift. You're no longer just a husband or wife, but also a full-time caregiver. This shift is layered with love, responsibility, and sometimes loss. One of the biggest, often hidden challenges. When caregiving changes intimacy, sometimes dramatically. What happens when the physical closeness, the intimacy that defines so much of a relationship, disappears? When, for months or even years, there's no sex, no physical affection, and you're left navigating a whole new kind of relationship. These are real dilemmas spousal caregivers face, and today, we're talking about them openly. We'll explore what it means to love through these changes, find resilience, and honor both your needs and your partner's. This journey can feel lonely, but together, let's shed light on these often overlooked struggles. All right, let's dive into something a lot of spousal caregivers face, but don't often talk about: the emotional landscape of caregiving and how the role of spouse starts to shift into caregiver. It can feel natural in some ways since you're caring for someone you've shared so much life with, but it can also feel completely foreign, almost like stepping into someone else's shoes. One of the first big changes in spousal caregiving is the shift from partner to caregiver. You're no longer just sharing life side by side. You're now responsible for managing medications, handling doctor's appointments, and taking on daily care needs. It's a full shift in focus from building a life together to helping sustain their life. This change often happens quickly, and it can stir up a mix of emotions. Caregiving for a spouse often brings a type of living grief. Your partner is physically present, but you might feel like you're gradually losing parts of who they were. It's a loss that doesn't get the rituals or support traditional mourning brings, but it's a very real experience. You're grieving the changes in your shared dreams, the loss of your partner as you once knew them, and sometimes even shifts in their personality. One listener, let's call her Linda, shared her experience with her husband, who has early onset Alzheimer's. Watching his personality shift, seeing him forget little details of their life, and eventually not even recognizing her name, it was a daily process of losing pieces of him bit by bit. Linda put it this way: "I feel like I'm losing him a little more each day, but I can't grieve him the way I would if he were actually gone." Her story really highlights the ongoing nature of this grief. It's not a one-time event. It's an endless, layered experience that can be incredibly tough to navigate. And on top of that, caregivers sometimes face shifts in their spouse's personality. As time passes, a spouse may seem more irritable, withdrawn, or even downright ungrateful. That can be tough to deal with, especially when you're pouring so much energy into their care. This change often has nothing to do with you as the caregiver. Instead, it's frequently a response to their own feelings of loss, fear, and maybe even anger over losing control of their life. So if you're experiencing this shift, know that these emotions, grief, sadness, frustration, even guilt, are completely normal. Grieving doesn't mean you're failing as a caregiver or somehow letting your spouse down. Recognizing and allowing yourself to feel these emotions is a necessary step in finding balance. Talking with a counselor, joining a support group, or simply sharing your feelings with a trusted friend can make a big difference. You're not alone, and sometimes just acknowledging what you're feeling can lighten the load a bit. In this next segment, we'll dig into some practical strategies for finding balance in caregiving, both for yourself and your relationship. Being a caregiver for an aging parent or spouse can be incredibly demanding, and without clear boundaries and open communication, it can take a toll on your marriage. So, let's look at a few ways to keep your marriage strong while handling caregiving responsibilities. First, let's start with open communication. When stress piles up, it's easy to put off important conversations, but keeping an open dialogue with your spouse is essential. Don't let worries or frustrations simmer. Set aside regular times to check in with each other, share what's on your mind, and listen. Really listen to what your spouse is going through. You both need to feel heard and supported, and remember, no topic is off limits. trust each other to talk openly about the good, the bad, and everything in between. When you're having these conversations, make sure it's a two-way street. Listen without interrupting, and let your partner express themselves fully. Reflecting back on what they've shared can help you both feel understood. Now let's talk about making room for self-care and alone time. When you're caught up in caregiving, your own needs can get pushed aside. Make it a priority to carve out time for yourself, whether it's going for a walk, relaxing in a quiet spot, or diving into a good book. Encourage your spouse to do the same. Alone time is necessary to recharge and come back to each other with fresh energy. And while self-care is crucial, so is making time for each other. Keep the romance alive by planning regular date nights or even small moments together. A shared meal, a walk, or just a few minutes of one-on-one time in the morning. If caregiving feels overwhelming, consider asking for help from family, friends, or even professional respite care to give yourself a break. Another key part of managing caregiving stress is building a support network. You and your spouse don't have to go through this alone. Reach out to family and friends, connect with neighbors, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Professional assistance can also make a huge difference, so consider hiring in-home care or using community services if possible. Lastly, remember that simple acts of kindness can go a long way in keeping a marriage strong. Small thoughtful gestures like cooking your spouse's favorite meal, offering a compliment, or even just acknowledging their hard work can show that you care. These little actions add up and keep the relationship grounded in appreciation and love. Caregiving is a journey, and it's important to prioritize not just the needs of your loved one, but also the needs of your marriage. By communicating openly, finding ways to support each other, and leaning on your support network, you can protect your relationship and continue to be there for each other in this challenging time. All right, let's dive into a question I often get. Can couples stay together in senior living communities, even if one of them needs more care than the other? It's a big decision, and for many couples, being able to stay together is essential. Moving to a senior community is a big shift on its own, but when couples can make that move together, it can bring a lot of comfort during what might be a challenging transition. As couples age, their health needs may differ, and it's not uncommon for one spouse to take on a caregiving role. However, this role can become overwhelming as health challenges increase, and many couples reach a crossroads about where to live, how their needs will be met, and how to stay together through it all. The good news is that many senior living communities, especially those offering assisted living and continuing care, can accommodate couples with different care levels. This means that even if one spouse needs assistance with daily activities like medication management or mobility, they can still live with their partner while only paying for the services each individual needs. Communities often offer various unit layouts, from studios to two-bedroom apartments, allowing couples to choose the space that suits their needs and lifestyle. Now let's talk about costs. According to the Genworth 2021 Cost of Care Survey, the median cost for a one-bedroom in assisted living is around $4,500 a month. If a couple shares this space, they'll pay for the unit plus an extra fee for the second resident, which can range from $500 to $800. So, on average, a couple might expect to pay about $5,650 monthly, though this varies based on location, unit size, and specific care needs. One of the perks of assisted living communities is flexibility in service offerings. If only one spouse needs help, they're the only one paying for those services. The other spouse can live independently in the same unit without additional care costs. In some cases, couples choose adjoining units or even two-bedroom apartments to give each other personal space while staying close. But what about those cases when one spouse needs much higher care, like memory care or skilled nursing? Some communities, especially those set up as continuing care retirement communities or CCRC, provide a full spectrum of care options all in one location: independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing, and memory care. This setup allows couples to remain on the same campus, even if their care needs differ significantly. It's a great way to manage separation-related anxieties that can arise when one partner requires a higher level of care. Isolation is also a big factor for couples considering a move. As spouses age, they may lose loved ones or experience less frequent visits from family. Senior communities work to combat isolation by offering common areas, organized events, and group activities, like exercise classes, games, and even outings. These activities allow residents to connect with others, build friendships, and maintain a social life. Family and friends are usually welcome to join these activities, which helps couples stay connected to their loved ones. Different interests and hobbies, senior living communities typically offer diverse programs to cater to various interests. Whether one spouse is into gardening while the other enjoys group games, or one wants to stay active while the other prefers quiet activities like reading, these communities usually have something for everyone. An important part of making this transition work is a geriatric functional assessment, which evaluates each person's health, abilities, and care needs. This initial assessment helps staff create a tailored care plan that meets both spouses' needs, ensuring that the community is a good fit. A follow-up assessment is often conducted 30 days after move-in, then every 6 months, to adjust plans as health needs change. Ultimately, finding the right senior living community for a couple is about balancing both partners' needs. A lot of thought and compromise might be necessary, especially if one partner is experiencing cognitive decline, but finding that balance allows them to continue sharing life together. It's a big decision, but it's also an opportunity to find a new home where both partners are safe, supported, and together. In our next segment, we'll cover some unique and often overlooked scenarios that spouse caregivers face, situations that add even more complexity to an already tough role. These challenges might not be the first things we think about in caregiving, but they're real and can impact relationships in profound ways. And keep in mind, we'll be getting to some audience questions later in the episode, like, what if my husband wants my mother in a care facility, but I'm not ready? And what happens when caregiving means no more intimacy? These raw questions dig into some of the toughest parts of caregiving, so stay tuned for those insights as we move forward. Now, we will go right into these unique scenarios and talk about what they mean for caregivers like you. Let's start with andropause, sometimes called male menopause. We hear a lot about menopause in women, but men go through their own version of it, and it doesn't get nearly as much attention. Andropause is a gradual decline in testosterone that can affect energy, mood, motivation, and emotional well-being. When men are suddenly in the role of caregiver, maybe for a spouse with health issues or cognitive decline, these hormonal shifts can make an already hard job even harder. For male caregivers, symptoms of andropause like fatigue, irritability, depression, and a lower libido can add hidden challenges. It can be tough for both the caregiver and their partner because they may feel their energy and patience thinning out. Imagine a guy in his late 50s or early 60s who's been caring for his spouse through a long illness. He might be feeling low energy or mood changes, but he's chalking it up to caregiver burnout when it's actually andropause making things even tougher. The emotional strain of caregiving, mixed with these physical changes, can lead to frustration and guilt about not feeling as patient or strong as he used to. One guy I talked to, let's call him Jack, shared what it's been like caring for his wife, who has early onset Alzheimer's. Jack started noticing he was getting more irritable and frustrated, struggling to handle both his wife's needs and his own changing health. He said he felt guilty about not being as patient or affectionate, but after talking to his doctor, he learned about andropause and realized that his own aging was playing a big role. Once he understood what was going on, he could show himself a bit more compassion, and he began focusing on his health along with his wife's care. Jack even joined a men's support group where he found he could talk through his struggles without feeling so alone. For male caregivers dealing with these changes, it's important to address these symptoms. Regular exercise, eating well, and checking in with a healthcare provider can make a real difference. These self-care practices might not solve everything, but they can help you build the resilience you need for the journey ahead. So, for any male caregivers out there feeling especially drained or unmotivated, it could be more than just caregiver burnout. Reaching out for advice and support might be exactly what you need. Let's move on to a really tough part of caregiving for a spouse with dementia, the loss of recognition. Dementia changes how people experience and remember their loved ones, and that can mean there are times when the person you've shared your life with no longer recognizes you as their partner. It's heartbreaking and can be one of the most painful parts of caregiving. This kind of situation forces caregivers to rethink their role, their relationship, and sometimes even their own sense of self. One well-known story about this is from Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Her husband John developed Alzheimer's and eventually moved to a memory care facility. While he was there, he formed a romantic connection with another resident. Though it was painful and unexpected, Sandra chose to accept his new relationship because it brought him comfort and joy. This act of love wasn't easy, but it shows how dementia changes relationships and how some caregivers find ways to adapt with compassion. For many caregivers, watching a spouse with dementia form new attachments or lose recognition of their shared life together is incredibly hard. Even when they know it's just part of the disease, it can still feel like a betrayal. Imagine caring for your spouse daily only for them to mistake you for a nurse or accuse you of being a stranger in their home. It's an emotional toll like no other. Some spouses cope by focusing on the care and companionship they can still give, letting go of the hope that their spouse will remember them as they once were. This shift in mindset can be one of the hardest parts of caregiving. Dementia doesn't look the same for everyone, and not all caregivers face the same loss of recognition. Some people still find meaningful, if different, ways to connect, while others go through long stretches of separation and misunderstanding. One listener shared a story about her husband with Lewy body dementia. Sometimes he wouldn't recognize her and would see her as a stranger in his own home. But every now and then, there'd be a little flicker of recognition in his eyes, like he remembered her, even if just for a moment. Those brief, clear moments became treasures for her, something she held onto tightly. If you're dealing with this challenge, here are a few things that might help with the emotional side of it all. Redefine connection. Dementia might change your relationship, but it doesn't erase the bond you share. Look for new ways to connect, whether it's through touch, music, or just being present. Some caregivers find that playing music from important times in their lives can spark recognition and bring comfort. Focus on moments of joy. While it's hard to see your spouse forget shared memories, you can still make new ones. A quiet walk, sharing a meal, or just sitting together can bring moments of peace and joy. It's not the same, but it can still mean a lot. Lean on support systems. Having a network of friends, family, or a support group that understands can make a huge difference. Talking about the struggles, the small victories, and the challenges can be really healing. Support groups, especially for dementia caregivers, provide a safe space to share feelings that might be hard to talk about with others. Allow yourself to grieve. It's natural to grieve the loss of the relationship as it once was. Don't push those feelings away. Some caregivers find comfort in counseling, journaling, or spiritual practices to help them process the changes. Seek professional help when needed. Dementia can be unpredictable and emotionally intense. If your loved one becomes aggressive, or if you're feeling overwhelmed with depression or anxiety, reaching out to professionals can provide both safety and relief. For those who aren't caregivers, this gives just a glimpse into the courage and resilience it takes to care for a spouse with dementia. Caregivers face emotional limits that are constantly tested, yet they keep showing up with love and compassion. For those of you who are caregivers, know that your dedication, even in the face of these unique challenges, is a profound act of love. As we wrap up this segment, just remember, caregiving is a journey, and each stage brings new realities, new challenges, and new ways to connect. Whether it's dealing with andropause as a male caregiver or facing the pain of lost recognition due to dementia, you're not alone. There's a community of support here for you, offering strength and encouragement. In our next segment, we'll talk about the financial and legal sides of spousal caregiving and share some practical tips to make things a bit easier to manage. And later in the episode, we'll dive into some controversial audience questions like, what if my husband wants my mother in a care facility but I'm not ready? And what happens when caregiving means no more intimacy? So please stick around. All right, welcome back. In this segment, we're getting into one of the toughest parts of caregiving, coping with loss and figuring out how to move forward when a spouse passes away. Losing a spouse changes everything. It's a profound loss that can leave you feeling numb, fearful, guilty, or even angry. These are all natural emotions. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. In fact, grief can bring both physical and emotional struggles, like difficulty sleeping, lack of appetite, and trouble concentrating. But through it all, remember that everyone's grieving process is unique. As time goes on, you might find the intense pain gradually lessens, with good days starting to outnumber the bad. Mourning takes time, and it's okay to be patient with yourself. It's also okay if, at times, the grief feels like it's going on too long. If overwhelming sadness or depression persists and interferes with your daily life, consider talking to a doctor. There's no shame in reaching out for help. One piece of advice I often share is to take care of yourself. Grief can be tough on your health, so try to get enough sleep, eat well, and keep moving. Avoid leaning on unhealthy coping habits like smoking or drinking. Being with friends or family who can listen and support you is incredibly valuable. Some people find a grief support group comforting. It's a space where you can connect with others who truly understand what you're going through. Making big changes right away, like moving or changing jobs, isn't usually recommended. Give yourself time to process and adjust before making decisions that might add to your stress. And remember, your family is likely grieving too, so be gentle with each other. Grief impacts relationships, and it may take time to settle into a new normal together. It's also important to tackle the practical aspects of loss, like updating your will, reviewing insurance policies, and changing account names if they were shared with your spouse. These are small steps that bring a sense of control during a time that often feels chaotic. When it comes to going through your spouse's belongings, remember, there's no rush. Some people find comfort in sorting things out gradually, keeping certain items as memories while letting go of others. Finding a new social rhythm can be a big challenge after losing a spouse. Going out alone may feel strange, and you may wonder when, or if, you're ready to socialize again. Start small. Join friends for simple activities like a walk or a casual meal. Trying out a new class, volunteering, or even getting a part-time job can help you stay connected and give you something to look forward to. Rejoining the social world doesn't mean forgetting your spouse. It's about bringing their memory with you into a new chapter. In time, you may want to explore new friendships or groups that fit where you are in life now. Give yourself permission to go at your own pace. It's a journey, and there's no rush. To everyone listening today, remember, grief is deeply personal, and it takes time. Take small steps, lean on your support network, and allow yourself to heal in whatever way feels right for you. Amid all the emotional waves, some practical things need attention too. Taking care of the legal and financial responsibilities after a spouse's passing can feel intimidating, but breaking it down into small steps can make it more manageable. Here are a few basics to help guide you through this process. One of the first things to check is your will and any estate plans. Many couples have joint wills, trusts, or shared accounts, so updating these documents is important to make sure your wishes are met and your assets are protected. It's a good idea to consult with a lawyer or estate planner who can help you update beneficiaries, adjust any power of attorney documents, and make other necessary changes. When a spouse passes, shared accounts, investments, and insurance policies may need to be reassigned or retitled. This includes bank accounts, property titles, retirement accounts, and insurance policies. Contact each institution to understand the steps for transferring assets or updating accounts. Having a list of key documents like the death certificate, your marriage certificate, and any relevant financial statements will make these conversations easier. If your spouse manages certain aspects of your finances, this can be a challenging adjustment. A lot of widows and widowers find it helpful to meet with a financial advisor who can offer guidance on managing accounts, creating a budget, or developing a plan for any significant life changes. If you're navigating this loss later in life, it may be a good time to think about long-term financial plans for yourself. Options like long-term care insurance, setting up a trust, or planning for future health needs can bring peace of mind and help avoid future stress. It's not an easy task emotionally, but having a plan in place can make things smoother down the road. Another key step after losing a spouse is updating beneficiaries on different accounts, like life insurance policies, retirement accounts, and any pensions. This is usually a straightforward process, but essential to make sure your assets go where you want in the future. It's an easy step to overlook, but it's crucial to make sure everything is up to date. Finally, there's the matter of taxes and any outstanding financial responsibilities. Depending on your spouse's assets and income, there may be estate taxes or other financial matters to address. Working with an accountant who's experienced with estate taxes can help you navigate this process more smoothly. Keep in mind there are often deadlines associated with estate taxes and other filings, so it's a good idea to get assistance early to avoid last-minute stress. Handling these responsibilities can feel overwhelming, but breaking them down into steps and getting professional help when needed can make it a lot easier. If you're feeling lost, know there are resources out there to support you. From legal aid to financial planners and organizations that offer guidance on estate planning. Moving through this stage of life isn't easy, and it's okay to feel uncertain or overwhelmed. Just remember, there's support available to help you through every step of this transition, and you're not alone. Let's dive into a topic that can be a bit complex, but is crucial for those navigating Medicaid and spousal care in nursing homes. How to maintain Medicaid eligibility if the spouse living at home passes away first. Under Medicaid rules, a spouse who stays at home, called the community spouse, can exempt up to 50% or even 100% in some states of a couple's countable assets, up to around $119,220. But if the community spouse dies, this exemption disappears. Often, under typical wills, everything would pass to the surviving spouse. If that spouse is in a nursing home on Medicaid, this inheritance can exceed Medicaid's $2,000 asset limit, putting eligibility at risk. A common question is, can the community spouse avoid passing assets to the nursing home spouse by changing their will? Unfortunately, it's not that simple. State laws generally ensure that a surviving spouse is entitled to a certain portion of the deceased spouse's assets, typically between 1/3 and 1/2. However, some states allow this share to be placed in a trust that won't affect Medicaid eligibility. Another smart step in Medicaid planning is retitling assets to avoid automatic transfer. For example, if a house remains in joint names and the community spouse dies, the property will pass solely to the nursing home spouse. While this doesn't necessarily impact Medicaid eligibility, if they still have an intent to return home, it could lead to issues later, as the state may claim the property's value for Medicaid recovery. One proactive strategy is to convert the community spouse's assets to non-countable forms, like Medicaid qualified annuities or household items, rather than gifting them, which can trigger penalties. In summary, planning for Medicaid eligibility involves carefully structured wills, asset titling, and understanding state-specific rules to secure the nursing home spouse's coverage and protect family assets. In the following segment, I'll be answering some questions from the audience. Let's dive right in. Question: how can I manage my husband's request to place my mother in a care facility when I'm not ready for that? I want my son to know his grandmother and feel strongly about caring for her myself, but my husband wants her out of the house and says he needs his space back. This question really hits home because it touches on the heart of so many caregiving challenges. Trying to balance family needs, keep a marriage strong, and honor your own values all at once. First off, I completely get it. You're coming from a place of love, wanting to care for your mum and have her be a part of your son's life. But I can also see where your husband's coming from too. Living with a parent, especially one who might have dementia or need constant care, can be a huge adjustment for anyone. Let's talk about a few different perspectives I've seen on this. Some folks out there have suggested finding a middle ground, maybe setting up a space in your home or finding a nearby apartment where she can live independently but still close by. That way, you're not placing her in a full-time care facility, but you're also giving your husband some personal space back. And you'd still be close enough for regular visits, so your son can spend time with his grandma and you can keep an eye on her needs. Other people have shared that sometimes a memory care facility can actually be the best option for everyone. I know that might sound hard to consider, especially if you've had negative experiences with nursing homes, but quality memory care can give her a supportive environment where trained staff meet her needs. Some families find this actually improves the time they spend together because they're no longer focused on the tough daily caregiving tasks and can just enjoy visits without all the stress. Remember, choosing professional care isn't giving up. It can just mean focusing on a different kind of quality time. But hey, I also know some people feel strongly that keeping their loved one at home is just non-negotiable. For you, that might mean setting boundaries and finding ways to meet in the middle with your husband. Maybe it's hiring part-time help or setting aside weekly us time to keep your connection strong. Communication is key here. Ask him directly what he needs and how he's feeling about the situation, and be open about your own feelings too. You might find some room to work together once everyone feels heard. At the end of the day, I think caregiving decisions are deeply personal. It's about finding what's going to work for your unique family setup. You're clearly dedicated to your mum's well-being, and that's amazing. But keeping a strong relationship with your husband is equally important. This isn't an all-or-nothing decision, and it doesn't have to be rushed either. Maybe take small steps, explore your options, and keep checking in with each other along the way. Balancing caregiving with family life isn't easy, but by keeping the conversation open, you're already taking a great step in the right direction. Question: how can I cope with caring for a spouse who has dementia? I feel isolated, and the relationship feels so different now. This question really struck a chord because it captures something so many caregivers feel, especially those caring for a spouse with dementia. Many responses touched on the loneliness and emotional toll of watching a partner's personality change. For so many, it feels like grieving someone who's still here, which can be a heavy and confusing feeling. Some shared stories about how they stay connected to their spouse in small ways, like sitting together quietly, using music to bring comfort, or simply holding hands. Even when the relationship feels changed, these small gestures bring a sense of peace and closeness. Others express that feelings of frustration, sadness, and even anger are totally normal. It's exhausting work, and seeing a loved one change so drastically can feel like a constant cycle of loss. There are practical tips to help with the stress. Many caregivers found relief in hiring part-time help or using respite services, allowing them some time to recharge, even if it's just a short walk or time to read. One caregiver mentioned how helpful it was to reclaim small parts of their life, dedicating a bit of time each week to their own hobbies or self-care. These small breaks made them feel more refreshed and able to cope. A lot of caregivers also talked about the importance of connecting with a support group, whether in person or online. Sharing experiences, listening to others who truly get it, and realizing they're not alone has been a lifeline for many. This is how I feel. Caring for a spouse with dementia is such a unique journey, and it's totally understandable to feel isolated. It's like you're holding onto the person you love while adjusting to a whole new reality. That feeling of loss, even though your spouse is physically there, can be incredibly challenging. Finding moments to connect, whether it's just sitting together, listening to familiar music, or looking through a photo album, can help create those small but meaningful moments of closeness. And while caregiving can feel all-consuming, taking care of yourself is so important. Whether it's stepping outside for a quick breather or taking a few hours to do something you love, these little acts of self-care really add up. Don't feel guilty for needing a break or asking for help. They're necessary to keep you going. And remember, you're not alone in this. There's a whole community of caregivers out there who understand exactly what you're going through. Caregiving is more than just physical care, it's an emotional journey too. Give yourself some grace. You're doing something incredibly tough, and that strength is a testament to the love you have for your spouse. Hang in there and don't hesitate to lean on others. Question: what should I do when my husband is bedridden and our intimacy has completely vanished? I haven't had any closeness, no sex, no kisses, no holding hands, for 3 years, and it's really affecting me. Is there a healthy way to cope with this? This question hits on something I've seen countless caregivers wrestle with, but rarely feel comfortable bringing up. Let's face it, this isn't an easy topic, and feelings about it can be all over the map. Some folks believe strongly in sticking to those marriage vows, in sickness and in health, and look for ways to connect outside of physical intimacy. They often suggest leaning on the emotional bond that brought you together in the first place and finding new ways to show affection, even if it's just through small touches, a hug, or a shared moment. For them, it's about preserving that connection, even when the relationship feels more like close friendship than romance. On the other hand, I've seen people who believe that while marriage vows are important, they don't erase very real human needs. For many caregivers, the role can be exhausting, leaving them feeling isolated, unfulfilled, and in need of companionship they're no longer getting from their partner. Some caregivers have found emotional outlets in support groups or therapy where they can talk about these feelings openly. For some, seeking companionship outside the marriage is an option, especially if their spouse can no longer engage in intimacy. They feel that nurturing their own emotional health and needs is essential to staying resilient and grounded. One perspective that really stood out to me came from someone who had lived through this themselves. They shared that as a patient, they'd actually given their spouse permission to find companionship elsewhere, because they could no longer fulfill that role. Now, that approach isn't for everyone, but it speaks to the power of open, honest conversations about what both partners need and expect, even when facing difficult realities. Of course, I've also heard concerns about stepping outside the marriage, with some seeing it as a slippery slope that could lead to emotional fallout and regret. For them, the focus is on resilience and reframing the relationship to emphasize an emotional bond, even if physical closeness is off the table. This question shows just how complex these feelings are, and it's a reminder that there isn't one right answer. Different paths work for different people, and everyone has to navigate this in a way that honors their values, needs, and unique relationship. Here's the thing, intimacy, whether it's physical, emotional, or somewhere in between, is part of what makes us human. It's completely understandable to feel sad, frustrated, or even resentful when that closeness disappears. And it's equally valid to be torn between wanting to honor your marriage vows and feeling the need for connection that your spouse, for whatever reason, can no longer provide. This isn't an easy road, and there's no one-size-fits-all answer here. What I'd suggest first is to have an open conversation with your spouse if possible. Sometimes just bringing up your feelings, honestly but gently, can be a relief for both of you. They might be holding back affection because they feel inadequate, or they're struggling with feelings of depression or self-doubt. Starting a conversation might allow you both to navigate some of the underlying feelings and maybe find new ways to be close, even if it doesn't look like it used to. On the other hand, if physical intimacy is completely off the table and you're feeling deeply unfulfilled, think about other ways you can nourish that need for connection. That might mean joining a support group, connecting with friends, or even exploring forms of therapy that can help you express and work through those feelings. And if you're considering companionship outside of your marriage, tread carefully. It's a big step that could lead to unexpected emotional consequences, both for you and your spouse. In the end, don't beat yourself up for feeling this way. Being a caregiver is an incredibly tough role, and it's natural to crave closeness. No matter what path you take, honor your own needs while being mindful of your spouse's limitations. And remember, there's no shame in seeking support, whatever that looks like for you. Before we close, I just want to acknowledge the incredible resilience it takes to be on this caregiving journey, especially when things shift from being a caregiver to navigating loss. This path is one of life's biggest challenges, and you're facing it with a strength that deserves recognition. Healing from loss doesn't happen overnight, and being gentle with yourself is part of the process. Resilience doesn't mean putting on a brave face or pushing through pain. It's about allowing yourself to feel everything that comes up, leaning on others, and finding support when you need it. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days will be lighter, some will be harder. Remember to surround yourself with people who can lift you up, and don't be afraid to reach out for a listening ear. And as you start moving forward, know that this doesn't mean leaving your spouse's memory behind. They'll always be a part of you, a chapter that shaped who you are. Carrying those memories as you step into this new phase of life is a beautiful way to honor the love you shared, while giving yourself permission to embrace the present. Thank you so much for joining me in today's conversation. It's been an honor to explore these deeply personal topics together. If you find the information helpful, please like and subscribe. And as always, if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, leave a comment. Thank you and be well. This is your host, Rosalie. Until next time.